I went to acupuncture for the first time, believing in it, not at all. Believing like, what's a few more pokes and prods? I've tried everything. And when I was on that table, I literally felt as though I was levitating and sinking, and I could hear voices, not in an alarming way. Actually, it was a very calming way. It's like somebody helped me to facilitate opening up another dimension of reality. And it was absolutely a God experience. What I knew laying on the table at 18 was that there was no way that the science that I was studying or any science that we could ever come up with could explain the infinite nature and what it is that I was experiencing in that moment, but also just the actual truth of reality. And then I also just knew that there was a God, although I had no idea what that meant. It's just God exists.
Your way through life and receiving your way through it. When the nervous system is braced, over-efforting, looping, scanning for danger, intuition gets muffled. But when safety is restored, something else becomes available. Clarity that feels less like figuring it out and more like being guided. My guest on today's show is Dr. Amy Albright, a trailblazer in human potential who integrates neuroscience, Chinese medicine, leadership strategy, and spiritual intelligence. She works with everyone from high-performing executives to individuals navigating major life transitions, helping them build success that stays aligned with what matters most. In this conversation, we explore her unprompted spiritual awakening at age 18, how the body signals safety and what happens when it doesn't, and why busyness can become a subtle form of disconnection. We talk about accessing information beyond memory, what Dr. Albright means by thought forms, and how shifting attention changes what you can perceive. She also shares a simple 3-step process for establishing safety, reconnecting to the all that is, and allowing real inner recalibration to take place. This episode invites you back into coherence so you can feel steadier, listen cleaner, and move through life with less force and more flow. So without any further ado, on with the show.
Amy, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be a fun conversation. I'm glad to be able to continue forward perhaps on some of the topics we've already hit on.
Yeah, so we've had some great conversations. We met on Mosquito Island, which sounds terrifying, I suppose, to somebody who doesn't know what we're talking about. It's not all about mosquitoes and getting eaten alive. It's actually spelled Moskito. It's in the British Virgin Islands, and we were both speakers at a mastermind event run by Yannick Silver, who was a past guest on this podcast. Amazing marketer and author and spiritual person, really inspiring guy. And he runs a mastermind called Maverick. So that's how we met. And I'm really excited to have us continue the conversation that we had on that island and, kind of illuminate some concepts that maybe our listener or viewer has not been exposed to very much before. Let's first start off with your kind of superhero origin story. How did you get to where you are now? Did you have some crazy story of struggle that you had to overcome in order to get where you're at?
Yeah, multiple levels of crazy struggle story. But I feel like that has been the gift, really, right? If we overcome those struggles and those challenges, they turn into our gifts and blessings. So as a tee up, I really live in a very rich intersection of neurosciences. I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine also for my academic background, but I work in a laboratory and I've worked alongside of a neuroscientist for many years doing leadership with both coaching, advising, and then also redirecting and training the brain on how to perform better. I've been in all kinds of roles. I've done everything from help to be present while babies are being caught to boardrooms of, multi-billion-dollar companies and providing guidance. It's been a really wild and diverse career and lifetime. So to go to your question, what drove it all? I couldn't have planned this course. I couldn't have charted it on purpose if I'd tried, but I definitely don't believe it's accidental. I grew up, let's say, a little girl who listened to the wind, kind of hearing the soundless tones and understanding things from the world beyond. But then as I got in my older childhood, I had had so many places where I was traumatized and just burned by life and by a very chronic and complex health situation that I'd been having my whole life, that I felt actually that I was an atheist. not just an atheist, but an atheist studying neurosciences at university, had a massive spiritual awakening experience at 18 that was unprompted, unexpected, that really set my life off on a different trajectory. And basically, for the last 32 years, I've been weaving in the rigors of science, not just popular science as it's kind of put out into society, but deep understanding of medical literature and scientific rigor, and also a depth of understanding and exploration into what is the sacred and what does it mean to be human and who have we always been and what is the meaning of life, and yet all of those things anchored into how do I scale this business? How do I reorg? How do I do this merger or do this exit and work with post-exit stress and all of the things that can kind of come with that, the life transformations? There's all sorts of things that I found myself in as a meaning maker and a wayfinder, and someone that can serve essentially as a guide to people in all different phases of life. So thanks for listening to my answer, but man, it is hard to consolidate, the what I'm up to is a big thing to describe because it doesn't fit on a business card, and definitely how I got here the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the rule of having a one-page resume, I think you might have to have like 15 pages or something.
Just to even make the story make sense, right? Because it doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah. Well, who was it who said that the dots don't connect except looking backward? Was it Steve Jobs?
That might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I want to double click on what happened to you at age 18.
Mm.
What was that awakening experience that took you from atheist, like a scientific atheist, to a believer and an awakened individual?
Yeah, it was at about 18 years old that my grandpa and I first interacted in a deep way. I hadn't known him very well because he and my father were estranged from each other. And so he said basically two things. One is that I want you to go to acupuncture. I didn't realize you've been so sick and I'm going to send you. And the other one is we have things to talk about and you need to come around. I have things to tell you. Okay. So I went to acupuncture for the first time, believing in it not at all. Believing like, oh, what's a few more pokes and prods? I've tried everything. And when I was on that table, I literally felt, I'm not saying I did, but I felt as though I was levitating and sinking and I could hear voices, not in an alarming way. Actually, it was a very calming way. It's like somebody helped me to facilitate opening up another dimension of reality, and it was absolutely a God experience. And what I knew laying on the table at 18 was that there was no way that the science that I was studying or any science that we could ever come up with could explain the infinite nature and what it is that I was experiencing in that moment, but also just the actual truth of reality. And then I also just knew that there was a God, although I had no idea what that meant, right? It's just God exists. Okay, great. So it was I call it my Big Bang experience. It was a massive, massive trajectory shift, uh,
Wow.
totally unexpected. I was tracing meridians. The guy came back in and I could trace out all of the meridians and tell him what was happening in my body. And he was validating that, this is the name of that and this is what's happening. And yes, that's totally right that you're experiencing that. So, and then when I went to go see my grandpa soon after that, what I realized is that he had been a profound student of consciousness and an avid meditator for about 40 years at that point, and was personal friends with the Maharishi, which is the guy that brought transcendental meditation here to the United States. So that there was a rich legacy inside of his knowing, and that I hadn't had any access to it really prior to that. The Big Bang experience that I had on the acupuncture table was then rounded out by me just showing up and doing my best to stay present as he was laying on some huge constructs, just and not allowing me to take notes. He used to say, "There's no notes, just put it into your bones and never forget what I'm speaking to you." So it
No
was a
pressure.
very interest there's no pressure. My grandpa was, he was definitely a
Here's
genius,
the
but
24-word seed phrase. Don't ever forget it. Here you go.
that's
You
right.
can write it down.
That's pretty much him. He was absolutely a genius by IQ, but also massively able in tapping into energetics and had been an avid student, like I said, of consciousness and meditation for so many decades. So he was like, "This is just going to be what you know." And meanwhile, I'm trying to keep my eyes from rolling back into my head and, "Why are we talking about this?" But I was also very much drawn to all of that information that he was sharing. I could feel the wisdom of it.
Amazing. Yeah, my understanding of this idea of accessing information kind of in the field instead of just relying on your memory is that if you think of yourself as kind of like a dumb terminal and you're connected to the supercomputer, which is the all that is, the infinite intelligence, then it takes a lot of the pressure off in terms of remembering things because it will be popped back into your head, just like the supercomputer will send it to the dumb terminal as it's needed or upon
That's right.
request. And a great example of this is just a minor moment that just stuck with me. I was watching a show on Netflix called Life After Death with Tyler Henry. He's the Hollywood medium. He meets with celebrities and connects and gets guidance and information for the person he's meeting with. Yeah, he's clairvoyant and so forth. Anyways, he's pretty famous. He's got several Netflix shows. And there was this one moment where he was trying to think of the word. And I actually know what the word is because I asked and it just popped in my head. But I saw he he didn't remember the word. And then I just knew he was asking for it. Like
Right.
something just showed that he was not trying to access his memory. He was just being a receiver, like an FM antenna, receiving the word because he didn't remember it. And the word was eloped or elope.
Uh-huh.
Really cool. Really cool. So for me, I used to believe that I was losing my memory or my memory was getting worse. And then I had to shift that belief around because in actuality, I can show that my memory is incredible, especially for certain types of memories like numbers. I'm really
Mhm.
good at remembering numbers, like numbers of phone numbers and addresses from, let's say, my childhood that I haven't seen in decades. And so I had to shift that belief, which I did by looking for contrary evidence. And then I had to be open to the possibility that memory isn't just stored in neural synapses, and it's something that's in the field, in the quantum field, and the field of consciousness, and that I could just access it. And that was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I love this conversation. I love to help people to understand the very thing that you're describing, and I remember we touched on this when we were there in Mosquito Island. The all that is so much more infinitely capable and knowing, all-knowing than any particular human could be. So it doesn't matter if somebody has the most ridiculous IQ ever or if they've built their identity and understanding of themselves or what it is to be successful around just that typical IQ. The real intelligence does come when we can tap into that infinite wellspring of knowledge and not just knowledge, but wisdom, right? That's
Yeah.
really where we get to move into a deeper realm where we can naturally be more strategic, more effective, and really create the reality that we want by living in coherence with ourselves and with the field around us in a way that we can bring that together. And I love to anchor this even another step further. We see inside of the brains of very intelligent people. We have people from around the country and around the world come and we look and see how they're functioning. And the people that tend to be the ones that pride themselves on their intellect and be disconnected from this actually have typically some sort of a signature where there's a huge amount of over efforting, sometimes to the point where they're bleeding out basically 30% of the electrical power of their brain into over efforting. And often it's over efforting either inside of just stress and rumination, worry loops about themselves or kind of hypervigilance about the world around them. But often that's really anchored inside of that belief structure that we are all separate and that we have to fend every person for themselves and that kind of a fear and separatist mentality really creates a massive taxation on the brain And so then you have to wonder what would happen for those same folks. And what we see when we work with those folks is that they come into a relaxed confidence and they're much more capable of living a life with ease that actually has an increase in performance. That
Mm.
performance doesn't come from the mind, it comes from a feeling of safety, a feeling of connection, and the feeling of acting as one, like the way that a school of fish moves together, we're moving together with the all that is, with the energy and the information and the support and resources that are actually there for us in our immediate environment and in a larger energetic field as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they say in Kabbalah that you're walking in both worlds simultaneously. So a Kabbalist who is effective in this discipline is able to be cognizant of both this world, the physical, and the ethereal, the spiritual, the upper worlds
Mm,
simultaneously as they're going about their day. And I mean, that's hard. You get lost in the game. You get lost in the movie. Just like it's a really good movie, and you're in a movie theater, and you forget you're sitting on a chair in a comfy seat, and you have popcorn by your feet, and that you've got a snack there. It's just you're lost in the game, and
right.
so we need to snap out of it, and we need to stay aware and stay disciplined in this awareness that we're in both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's for every moment that we can be in it, it's a win. Right? And if we can string those moments together, then now we have maybe minutes. And if we can string some minutes together every once in a while, now we have hours. And usually, if we can string even minutes to hours, we're in a transcendent state where incredibly magical and miraculous things are happening for our health, for our business, for our connections with the people around us. And so the investment in that is so important. The disciplined awareness to that is so important for creating a different course of reality than we think is possible for us, right? We maybe can't even imagine what can happen or really who we are or what's even possible as a reality. And when we live in that way, then it shows us rather than us feeling like we have to know or control or make it happen. It's such a profound shift and it seems quite easy on one level. And then we know that it can be difficult, right? Because of the story, like you said. And it could be that it's just engrossing us with the busyness. I see a lot of busyness addiction. I'm overcoming my own busyness addiction, right? Because if we create enough noise inside of our own life, if we're constantly listening to a podcast or on the phone, we're not having quiet and we're not having stillness, even just for short periods of time in our day. There's almost an impossibility to reestablish that deeper connection with the unseen world. But
Right.
we've thought that we're supposed to be so busy.
Right. Well, you don't ever get bored because you're constantly able to distract yourself with whatever your favorite apps are on your phone, even if you're
That's right.
spending 10 seconds in line at the grocery store.
That's
You're like, "Oh,
right.
I'm gonna whip out my phone and not be bored." But boredom is essential to activate the default mode network, and never activating that is really it's damaging your brain and your cognition and your ability to receive information and guidance and insight and intuition, all
Yeah,
sorts of problems.
totally. I would say at a deeper level, we see there's about 80% of the brain's neurons in the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is what is sending information to the amygdala and to the insula about safety and survival and what to imprint as fear and what to imprint as joy, because the amygdala is also really important in um, processing and experiencing joy. Right. So we control that right reality in conscious and subconscious ways. And when we feel like we have to be on our phone while we have 10 seconds of space in line at the grocery store, like you were saying, it's a fear-driven response. Like, what if we actually just felt the bottoms of our feet and regulated our nervous system every time we had a break rather than putting our center of attention into a device, into basically a fabricated reality. Like, yes, everything that is made by human is real in one layer, but at the same time, it's all the illusion. But we put not just the primary focus of our awareness into that, but actually our devotion into that accidentally if we're not careful. And I think that's one of the most powerful things to really look at is what are we devoted to? Because if we're devoted to truth and we're devoted to freedom, then we no longer can be devoted to the traps, right? And then we start to, through that devotion, reallocate our attention and our time, our intention in a deep way. And because all of these things are, nothing that we're speaking of can be done just at the level of the mind. It has to be done with that heart, with that desire, with that true intentionality, with understanding and having reverence for what is sacred. And it's very difficult to find that in those quick hit kind of realities. We do really want to open up into them and live there as consistently as we can. Like I said, for as many moments as we can, strung together.
Yeah.
It's a potent shift.
Yeah. And so we're in fear. Or actually, there's 3 Fs: flight, fight, or freeze. And
Hmm.
my brain goes to freeze rather
Mm,
than fight or flight. So it's like the deer in the headlights sort of thing. So I don't take action when I really need to be, and I need to get unstuck. But this idea of being in fear, and however that manifests, that's your amygdala hijacking your entire nervous system and everything that's all your cognitive functions and your executive functions are all being hijacked by your amygdala if you're living in fear. Fear is the dream killer, right? And it's also the opposite of love. Love's opposite is not hate, it's fear.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, and it's also the intuition. Fear means that we're not in our intuitive capacity in that moment at the fullest that we could be. Because if we have, there was a quote, and I forget who said it, but if we have enough information, then we wouldn't be afraid.
And or maybe a similar sort of tack on that would be, if you have enough faith that you know that God is not just omnipotent, but has your best interests at heart every
Hmm.
moment, and everything is absolutely without exception for your highest good, then what's there to fear?
Yeah, that is my favorite quote. One of my favorite quotes is Rumi's "Live life as if everything is rigged in your favor," and agreed. That's not a kind of a Pollyanna way of looking at things. That's coming from a point of view of life hasn't been easy, and there's been a lot of trauma and struggle in my past, and I've been able to rewrite that to where I have a life of ease by understanding what those lessons are and being able to glean the wisdom, because the lessons in life will continue to repackage themselves. So one person divorces one person and then they remarry and it's the exact same personality, right? You pull off the Scooby Doo mask and you just keep on repeating patterns with people. And you're thinking to yourself, how did I end up here? Or, those deep pains and patterns that exist in life can continue. But what happens when we get down into that bedrock of transformation, when we really know the art of transformation, is that we can become clear and free so that we have a sense of forgiveness of our past, a sense of deep peace with the past and with ourselves for being a creator of that stuff. Because I think there's this in between where we realize that we're not a victim and that we're creating our own story. But then there's also, you'd prefer to have the story go differently. So we can be mad at ourselves for the story, which is just putting another barrier in the way of that self forgiveness and being able to have that fuller resolution. But what I see and what I help people with is, how do we get down to the place where we don't make a self-referential story, right? Like we're not talking about the traumas of our past, or we're not referencing when somebody asks how we're doing, we don't tell the story about how our spouse is doing or what other people are, it's the story of what's happening inside of our heart from a place of presence, not from a place of, well, I'm an adult child of an alcoholic that grew up and, with these kinds of traumas and these whatevers. And when we know that we're free of something, we can access it as a full, clear, recollected memory, but we're no longer living inside of that being our identity or a reference point, or even in the back of our mind through the day, because it's no longer really relevant when we pull and glean the wisdom from it, when that process is so complete.
Yeah. And we can unwittingly be facilitating the process of somebody staying asleep by asking them, "Hey, how are you doing? What's happening? How are things going?" And then they're just in this self-referential loop of sleepwalking through life. Instead, you could ask them a much more profound question like, any recent miracles, epiphanies, or insights? What's the most miraculous thing that's happened to you in recent days? Something like that opens, it's an open-ended question that gets them to really see the miracles and the blessings instead of just kind of recite a script.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say repeating on the 3D stuff to reinforce that 3D is the only layer of reality, right? They're only tracking and reporting on that one level. And honestly, a lot of people that are reporting in on that, the first thing that they go to is what's not working or what's the complaint rather than what's the win. So I love that you're pointing them in the direction with that question of what is the latest miracle. I love to help to reinforce to people that we are miracles as like I said, I witnessed more than one birth, and I feel like we are definitely witnessing a miracle in every moment of our life, just when we observe our own biology or when we look at what all of nature has created, and to be able to live in the awe and the wonder of that, and to be able to I think a lot of what we're describing is zoom out. A lot of the times people get so myopic into what it is that they're feeling or experiencing, and meaning emotions on the surface, not the deeper ones, and then the 3D kind of happenings of life, that they aren't necessarily in that longer term zoomed out perspective that doesn't bypass, but actually helps them to have meaning making happen, where we can start to notice the themes and patterns and trends and then create different outcomes via strategic ways of being. And one of those deepest strategies is to be in touch with our heart and our feeling.
It's awesome.
It is
So,
awesome.
one thing that maybe our listener perhaps missed,
Mm.
you gave that great Rumi quote, and then you said towards the end of it that basically that we agreed to. The game is rigged in our favor,
Mhm.
and we've agreed to this. I
Oh,
think you
yeah.
said that, right? That was
I'm
part
not
of the
sure if
quote.
I did, but that is definitely how I feel. So I would say we absolutely have agreed for this incarnation, whether we've appreciated it, enjoyed it, or not, especially with our parents and some of these basic things in our lives. Those are definitely agreements that we had when we came in. And so we can either live in, the regret or the denial of that is true, or we can get really excited about it, because regardless of how someone's story has gone up till this point, if we can become masters of what it is that we have come here to learn, then we get to graduate in the same lifetime. It's not like we have to hopefully glean, moderate amounts of insight and then be reincarnated to have a different outcome. The passageway, the doorway is always right there present for us in every moment. And I think that's it can help us to step out of the disillusionment and into the miracles and possibilities that are there for us in every moment in our lives and for our transformational capacities. Um, but it does require a depth of safety and a depth of trust, a depth of understanding about all these things. It's a courageous path, but I think that for many of us, it's a path that we must walk because we understand that we're creating suffering by doing anything else, suffering for ourselves and potentially suffering kind of out in the world around us through our lives as well.
Yeah. So suffering is basically whenever we deny reality, like it's just it's real, it's happening. It's more like the spiritual world is more real than the physical world, and we could fight reality, we could deny it exists, but it doesn't help us. It keeps us caught in this trap of the self-referencing and the feeling pity for oneself and the learned helplessness.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I like to say often that if someone is in pain, that they're in resistance. And it can be resistance to the what is of their circumstances of their life or that moment, but it can also be a resistance inside of their energetic field. So there's a whole body of medicine that I've developed over the last 23 years and observing as a clairvoyant how people actually transform. in real time. And I would say that there's essentially we're sitting or standing inside of a vertical column of light or a pipe of energy, and that pipe is is the dilation of that pipe has everything to do with safety and security. And for those that are like, no, I'm safe and secure, it's like, first off, we're talking about a continuum because there's always more. The more that we have in our lives, the more that we actually have the necessity for a deeper foundation of safety and security. Just like if we build more stories onto a building, we have to have a strong enough foundation or first floor, big enough first floor to make that work. So it's an ever changing landscape, and it's not one that is actually static because how we feel is reflected in somewhat transient ways, but it's also just kind of a baseline of safety and security. So I've seen plenty of highly successful, very productive, maybe in some cases extraordinarily wealthy people who don't have a solid foundational sense of safety, and they're living in a place of panic and fear. If it's not money or success or, these outward things that create that, how do we create that? And what does it mean to be safe? Because safety is actually a neurobiological reality. It's not a thought construct. People can be out of touch with or not know what an appropriate baseline for safety is, right? They're relative scales of safety. I feel safe. I feel fine right now, but it may not be that their body is resting into that safety. So when we look at things like heart rate variability or the functioning of the brain in extraordinary detail, we can find that safety. But I also have, like I said, the capacity to see it clairvoyantly. And I think that one of the most powerful tools that I've ever come across that's actually very simple is a 3-step process. And the first step is to establish safety. The second step is to establish the embodied knowing of the connection to the all that is. And then the third step is to just be in that state and allow for the alchemy that is natural, the perspective shift that is natural, the miracles that are natural in that state of being when we have safety and when we're living inside of the connection to the all that is. So if anybody is interested, I have that as a free tool and download on the website. And that tool has massively transformed people's lives because I know a lot of people might be listening and say, well, how do we actually do the thing? Or they're agreeing with us, but how do I get that to happen? And so I'm really happy to be able to just give that out as a free tool for everybody. It's deeply transformative. I've seen that breath all by itself just change people's lives in tremendous ways.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll include that in the show notes for sure. Let's talk a bit more about how you access clairvoyant information. So, do you see auras? Can you see, for example, energy on or emanating from me or on me, or like how does that work for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to energy. So on the one level, just to really anchor this for folks who are having an eye roll with the word even energy, acupuncture is really well established to be effective, and how it works is energy, right? We're perceiving and shifting the flows of energy that live, let's say, more or less inside of small pipelines inside of the body. And that energy also extends off of the body, and we can measure that. And we know that our mitochondria are making energy. So, anyway, this is a very, actually, quite grounded conversation. The predominant ways that I am perceiving, I'm set up to perceive energy would be either at the chakra level, which is kind of those energy centers as they go up and down the body. It's actually on the front and back side as not just the front, but the chakra level and then that pipe that I was describing. I feel like that the aura is somewhat interesting, but it's sort of just this w- it doesn't provide me as much information. I'm sure that there are other people who really focus on that. I feel like it's a relatively static and not as interesting level of looking at. And I love the moment by moment because I'm watching basically the way that we might watch how someone's facial expressions are changing as we're talking to them. I'm
Oh,
able to see their chakras open and contract.
oh,
And so
cool.
I'm watching a whole concert of information happen. I know that if somebody says something, if they feel really safe and confident versus if they feel insecure, and that might help me to guide the conversation, or maybe their throat gets tight, and so it just leads me to wonder, what's going on that they're not speaking or that they're afraid is being misunderstood. So all of that information is coming in real time and has allowed me to hone in my capacity to guide people as a coach and as a mentor to be able to find their truth that's underneath the truth and to be seen with safety and love because it's a very deep seeing and experience also of being loved at the same time. There's that, and then the pipe, like I was saying, I mean, that's another huge piece of information because what's happening down in the root chakra land. So for those that aren't familiar so much with chakras, the root chakra is literally between the legs, and it has to do with safety and survival, finances, money, placement in society, things like that. If that root chakra is not feeling, if the person doesn't have that foundational sense of safety, then the entire pipe that they're sitting in gets really small. And if that pipe is too small for what it is that they are processing, so they have something that is wanting to leave up and out through that pipe. If the pipe is too small in its diameter, then what happens is that that thing can't leave. And how that translates is it's a thought form that they can't get rid of.
Mm.
It's a pain that they can't release. It's something they know they would like to be able to heal, but they don't have enough space inside of that pipe to do so. So that's why I love, just like I was saying, as a simple tool, that download that's available because when we open up the diameter, there's not any resistance inside of the pipe. So in some ways, it's like energy plumbing. And we don't need to make it more complicated than it is, although the experience of being alive and being a human is quite rich and complex. But on one level, we just need to have enough clearance. And another term that we might use for that is resilience, to be able to process whatever it is that is in our field or in our awareness, or even what's happening in our body. Sometimes what's happening in our body just needs enough space so that we're not contracting around it and can release whatever body sensations or body experiences that we're having.
Now, you mentioned the word thought form. Can you define that for our listener who's not familiar with it?
That's a great question. So I would say that a thought form is thoughts are not just, I feel like people don't understand that they have actual materiality to them. So there's an energy that's associated with that. And then I think that essentially energy moves just like we know with about light, it moves either as particles or waves or in quantum kind of behaviors and mechanics. But no matter what, if you have a thought, there is an energy attached to it. And so when I describe a thought form, it is the complex structure of the awareness that's at the level of the intellect or the mind, and then also the energetics, and then also it speaks to that there's a genesis of that, right? So there's something that's having them believe or notice that thought form in that moment. And that could be a societal construct, or that could be an old belief, or that could be a universal truth. But either way, that there's a connection to something bigger than just what's at the level of the mind in that moment in their awareness.
Right. So a thought form could be something like money doesn't grow on trees. And because a lot of people believe that, it feeds that thought form. It becomes
Mhm.
a societal thought form that lives on from generation to generation. And then that infects you with its unhelpfulness. And then
Also,
you have to try and purge that from your energy field if it gets attached to you, kind of.
that's right. Yeah, if somebody has that statement in their awareness or they speak it out loud, then there will be places inside of their energetic field that thought form is rooted, and that rooting can be released. But just being able to recognize that it's a thought form to begin with. It's not a universal truth. I mean, how do we even talk about it to begin with? It's a nonsensical term, just for starters. But and what even is money? Like, we could really take it that far if we wanted, right?
Yeah.
But definitely the being able to create a sense of space and distance rather than just accepting the belief structures that are out there in society or that were handed down to us or are currently imprinted in our epigenetics. What if we understand that we can rewrite that for ourselves and track how that lives inside of ourselves? Like, even right now, as we say, money doesn't grow on trees. Like, say that out loud to yourself or inside of yourself, and feel how your body feels.
Yeah, that's yucky. I don't
It's so
recommend
yucky.
that.
Versus, we live in a miraculously abundant and awe-inspiring universe, right? There's a feeling in our body. So at the end of the day, the talk of intuition or our ability to navigate is so much anchored into our ability to just track our own body as a mammal, right? My dog is not particularly, she's not been studying any of the ancient arts of intuition, and she doesn't know Rumi, but she knows how she feels, right? Because she's a mammal. And so at some level, we need to just remain really simple in our approach, or at least come back to those basics all the time and be sure to tune in with ourselves on that animal level where we're getting a huge amount of insight and input about what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this quote in the Bible that wealth and honor comes from you, like from you, capital Y, from God. And if that's part of your prayers in the morning, which it actually is part of the Jewish morning prayers, then you recognize that your accomplishments, your skills, your intellect are not actually what's driving your revenue or income. It's all God. It's all the creator. And, you're just giving false confidence and false credit to the material things like your intellect when actually it's all a rigged game, and it's going to be for your highest good in any event. But you might end up getting a painful lesson in the process that you don't actually see as a blessing until
Right.
after the fact.
Yeah, I love that, and to add to that, I really feel like that people end up the most successful, both in terms of wealth, but also in terms of overall fulfillment, right? Because abundance is so much more than dollars in the bank account. I've seen billionaires not be happy and actually be very miserable. So the real wealth comes from living in alignment with one's self, the true nature of self, because we're each actually extraordinarily unique beings, although we have so much universal in common. But how do we live according to the honoring of ourselves and to our life's path? And I think that when we fall into that, then we are basically showing up to be of service to what it is that we said we would come here to do as an individual and what it is that we're a part of in terms of the collective. And I've seen that be richly rewarding and create for people, in so many cases, revenue that they didn't anticipate, career paths that are very unusual, and often a huge capacity to serve, which when we feel that fulfillment and that connection with what it is, the work that we're doing in the world, we're no longer prostituting ourselves for the dollar. And I just want to call that out because I think a lot of people think that success is prostitution. And I would like to say, no, it's not. I don't know of anybody that's a prostitute that's happy. And it doesn't matter how much money they make. And I'm not speaking only, of course, to the sexual prostitutes, but for people who are willing to sell out in order to make money, to do things that they don't believe in, or do things in a way that is extractive and uncaring in its nature. This is living to the false god of money. And it is a form of prostitution, and I wanna be able to call that out and have people that are in positions of wealth and power live in a different way, because we don't have to prostitute in order to be successful. It's just not, it's a bad equation that we were taught.
Yeah, like you don't have to tolerate a bad client. You don't have to tolerate a bad customer or business partner. It's just it's a choice. Yeah, I found that the Bible quote, by the way, it's 1 Chronicles 29:12. Both
Okay.
riches and honor come from you,
Mm,
and the rest of it is and you rule over all. So it's calling in our humility to
mhm,
it's not the power of our right hand that's making all the dough. It's like it's all a gift, and we get to feel like we're earning it, but it's
right.
still a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And to understand that when we work in service, when we're understanding the bigger, let me back up a step. It's when we recognize that we were taught that we are better than nature. I think that there's some, I think some of this actually came from perhaps a misunderstanding from the Bible. But regardless, however it got put into our society, that we are more important than nature rather than being a part of nature, right? Going back to the comment that I had about that we are mammals or that we are interwoven into this whole multi-dimensional and rich context here on planet Earth. If we believe that we're better than it, then we get to extract from it, and we're trying to take credit for things that aren't ours to take credit for. And that's not a fair thing. When we extract the credit from the all that is, or the God level of understanding, and try to make it ours alone, it's basically reflecting the myopic point of view that we have that is wanting to be corrected, because it's not possible. There's nothing that happens on its own here. The water is recirculating into the air, into the river, into the ocean, and so is everything that we are doing as we are moving through those motions. And yeah, so thank you for bringing us to that. I think it's so important to not just have this knowledge set of, oh yeah, we're all connected or we should be there for each other, but also to be able to hold that feeling of empowerment. Because this isn't, as we speak to this, we're not saying that people should be neutered of their sense of empowerment. That's not it either. But how do
But
we do it where it's accurate?
yeah, I mean, if you can surrender and you can also take responsibility, like this is a profound and difficult thing. It's easy to say, but very hard to do. Like take 100% responsibility for everything that happens to you, for you, in actuality, even if it just seems like a total victimization, because everything is agreed to. This is a rigged game, and you signed the contract. You signed all the soul contracts with all the people who have, come into your life for good or for bad. It's all part of the game.
Yeah. And those patterns don't have to repeat if we get the wisdom, right? So if we want the game to change, how do we take that root cause? And how do we understand that as we not just find the root cause and sort through the painful parts of life, but as we also sit in the joy and the gratitude of the wins and the successes and the miracles, how do we find the wisdom of that? Right. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to when talking about, like, we can't take the credit for these successes that come, like when I'm working in the intuitive spaces, I'm not taking the credit, nor should anybody be taking the credit for it. I do take the credit for me preparing myself as a vessel, choosing not to drink alcohol or eat gluten because I know those are bad for me, right? There's some things that I have to do to be really strong as a woman, as a human. And but the ultimately the information and the blessings that come through for folks are the divine. And if I were to get confused on that, then it's my giant ego out there in the world creating more ego stuff versus the actual, which is there's an element of my individual reality and my individuation that's extremely important to acknowledge. And at the same time, I'm operating inside of this all that is. And being able to hold those both are true can be tricky, I think. But it's the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a book I read years ago by Bruce Wilkinson called You Were Born for This.
Mm,
And the last step in his process it's a process for volunteering to deliver God's miracles. Instead of living in the land of good deeds, which is just, kind of 3D reality, you volunteer, you opt in to deliver God's miracles. And they're going to be challenges for you. It's not going to be comfortable. You're going to have to get outside your comfort zone and help people that you're being guided to that you probably don't want to help, because it's just the nature of how that works. And the last step of this process that Bruce goes through is to transfer the credit. Like a miracle happens, like a 1 in a trillion chance thing happens. And, a great example of that we talked about on a past episode. It was a group episode. It was So my friend Angelo is one of this kind of mastermind group that we're in, and he shared a story, which we also shared on the podcast, and that was he was at a diner with his family, and he felt guided. We were reading that book, You Were Born for This, as a group and meeting every Friday on Zoom to discuss it chapter by chapter. And he reported one week that he went to the diner or whatever. He was guided to give a large amount of money. I mean, large for a tip, $109, which is a strange amount, but that was exactly what was in his, what Bruce refers to as the God pocket. This is like a separate envelope or wallet or pocket where you keep money that is God's money that you are guided to deploy. So he's like telling this waitress at the end of the meal, how does a $109 tip sound to you? And she tears up and she starts bawling, and she shows a text message exchange with her mother from that day that said, honey, I don't have money for my meds this month. Can you
Oh,
please
wow.
help me out? It's $109.
Wow.
And her daughter, the waitress, texts back, I'm sorry, I can't even pay my own bills. I can't pay
Right.
you your $109. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Like, what are the odds, right?
That's
So
amazing.
when you volunteer, when you surrender to this and allow God to work through you, you're the pizza delivery guy for his miracles, and the most incredible things happen when you do that. And if you remember to volunteer on a daily basis, so it all starts with this this quote from Isaiah 6:8. Here I am, Lord, please send me. And so imagine, he's this super psychic, right? He's able to do clairvoyance and all sorts of things, and he's astral projected to this basically a board meeting where God is assigning out miracle assignments to archangels. And here's little Isaiah, interrupting the board meeting and saying on the side, hey, excuse me, can I have
Right.
some assignment too? Here I am. Please send me. I want to do it too.
Yeah.
So that's something I incorporate into my morning prayers is to ask God to send me. I
Mm,
want assignments too. The last part of this process, that was the first part, is volunteering, having that interest and that desire. And the last part of it, transfer the credit, you know,
yeah.
here's $109. Like, wow, this has changes my life. And I can't believe you, like, how did you know? Like, you must be psychic and you're like, what a gift you are. And like, this is all God. I'm just the
Yeah.
messenger.
I'm just
Even
doing
so
what I
saying I'm the messenger puts an
Mhm.
ego and an importance on you. And it's like, no, this is all God.
Right.
We're all just
Yeah.
instruments of the Creator working miracles through this physical reality. This is from God. This is for you from God.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been working inside of this space and I really appreciate this conversation. The way that I frame it is that I work for God and I serve the people, right? So I am a servant. I am not superior, and it doesn't matter the frame. That's just how I hold it, right? And in other words, I could be interfacing with a person making my matcha tea latte, and I show up as a servant, which is a very different thing. And it allows for a huge amount of presence because there's not necessarily anything I'm being called to do, being guided to do. But the way I say it, what you said earlier is like, I just take really good instruction. Like my job is to just be a really good servant to the divine in that way. Right. And so wonderful if that's a miracle for you. I mean, it brings me joy, but I'm not going to get lost inside of myself, because if I get lost inside of myself in a certain way, what can happen is I'm actually blocking the flow of miracles, because when we're lost inside of ourselves, when we're disconnecting from, on an energetic template level, on a field level, from the all that is and the truth of that interconnection, we're actually blocking the next happening. And so that's a really potent part of continuing to live inside of the miracle. Is I do think that it's very important for us to be, proud of ourselves for showing up in that way, but the way that we might be if we were proud of ourselves when we were 5 for tying our own shoes, right? Like It doesn't make us more important. It just means that we got to do something really cool and fun and keep it simple on that level, right? And just be excited like a child with it. And the potency of the excitement doesn't wear off, at least in my estimation. I feel like you're in that too. And it doesn't matter how many decades you've been playing this game, you're still excited. And that's actually a really important thing on a neurological level. A lot of highly successful peak performers have broken their capacity to receive reward. And we can see that in the brain. They don't have a sense of reward, so they're on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And what that means is they're not inside of love and gratitude. And they're not inside the present moment because they're into the next thing. Right. So living inside of that space is very important. But ultimately, I'm just here to do what I'm told. And and I think that that makes life a lot more interesting. And there's a relief that comes when you don't feel like you have to control all the outcomes because we can't be smart enough or prepared enough or whatever for everything that can come in our lives, but we can be attuned so that we have the equipment and the skills and the presence that we need in every moment. Like you said, accessing, even if it's not internal, just give it another breath or two in a relaxed, calm way. And if we've practiced regulating our nervous system, then it becomes very easy to find that regulation and not block the intuition or the ability to then move it up into that prefrontal cortex and be strategic about how we implement the wisdom, how we interpret the information as it's coming into our awareness.
So having like arrogance or hubris blocks the miracles, it blocks the intuition. What I find is also not being discerning about what you watch or what you listen to or what you look at. If a guy is eyeing girls on the street all the time, that's gonna mess with their ability to receive intuition and to receive the miracles and to be walking in both worlds simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not that, sinner be damned kind of mentality around it, but it's just like which frequency do you choose? Because if there's a presencing to those beautiful women on the street that's extractive and is there they are, and I'm going to pull energy off of them, which is how a lot of women will describe being ogled, is they can feel something just gross happening and pulling off of them, then they're not in that energy of interconnectedness. It's totally okay if they want to say, wow, look at that beauty. Like that's wondrous. But they're in a place of both giving and receiving and awe and wonder, like they would over a tree or a mountain or, a kitten or something like that. Then
Yeah,
that's a
what man
totally
is doing
beautiful.
that though?
Yeah, I don't know.
When he's
It
ogling
can
a
happen.
woman, he's not doing
It's
that.
not that's not the vibe, that's not what's happening. But just to say that, it's not that we have to live in such a way that we don't have positive experience, but just that how does that positive experience really get framed and what are we really doing with it? And, it is a choice, we're making choices all the time that are either bringing us in this giant if-then flow chart to the places where we have accelerated awareness and capacity and feelings of interconnectedness and joy and bliss, or we're bringing ourselves somewhere else, right? So it's just playing as many times as we can instead of that space of making that conscious choice, loving on ourselves when we fail, bringing ourselves back to the present moment and beginning again.
Awesome. Well, I know that's we're at time here. This is a great place to leave our listener with some great insights and thought provoking and inspiring concepts. So, if our listener wants to continue learning from you, if they want to perhaps work with you, maybe get some coaching or go through that process that you have that's very science based as well as spiritual. Do you want to quickly kind of explain what you offer at your center and then how they could work with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the invite on that. We have a variety of programs based on level of desire, availability for travel. So we have things available online or kind of in a mixed format or on site. And it can be everything from working with me one on one for strategic advising, executive coaching, more discussions like this, and application into one's individual life so that it's very applicable rather than, being anywhere near philosophical. And I also, we have hybrid programs where we can create the health and even kind of the home biohacking. Like, how do we utilize equipment and technology to increase awareness and to be able to catalyze our consciousness and step out of our traumas? So we've got all kinds of remote programs, 100% online. I'll be launching the Wisdom School soon this year. And it's actually a relaunch. Before I was calling it Mystery School, that I'll be working in more of the brain elements, because I feel like that really helps to keep things grounded. So that's an online program. And then we have our Signature Intensive, which is actually a multi-month program with a 5-day on-site. And we're seeing massive changes in people's EEG because we're changing how their brain is functioning, and they really do go home quite a different person. And then those changes grow in over time as the neurology has a time to respond to the signals and the learning that it had while it was here. So it's it's a wide swath of offerings. You don't have to know what you are interested in or what's the right fit. You can just reach out and we can help you to understand the offerings and then also get placed into the right thing for you. So that along any of those offerings, there's some information online. There's a bunch more that we actually do in a conversation. So the team is happy to meet with you. So if you want to go to the website, holonexperience.com, HOLON experience.com for more information, and you can reach out there. And that's also where you can find that download that I was talking about with that 3-step process that's really foundational. That's just a free giveaway that is there as soon as you come to the site. So I encourage everybody to give that a listen. And once you've listened to that or a few times, you can basically learn those skills, and you'll be able to bring them forward throughout your life. And in every moment, eyes open and eyes closed, it's not a disruption to daily living to have that breath with you, that
Awesome.
process.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. What a gift. You are a gift, and light in the world. Thank you for being you and for sharing. Is there a social media platform that you're active on that you want to also offer or to suggest to our listeners to subscribe
I'll
or
be
follow you?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be launching Dr. Amy Albright on YouTube soon. I have spent most of my focus in deeply helping other people and not in building my platform. So not a lot out there at this point, but to be coming soon.
Yeah,
And
okay, good.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, listener. Go out there, make it a better world through your light. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.
If you want to hear more conversations like this on consciousness and how it shows up in everyday life, then I recommend episode 388 with Jeffrey Allen, episode 424 with Michael Roviello, and episode 498 with Dawson Church. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with Dr. Amy Albright at getyourselfoptimized.com/556. If you enjoyed the conversation, I encourage you to share this episode and, more importantly, the entire show Get Yourself Optimized with a friend. Change your life and help me spread the light. Thank you.